Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Welcome back to the Love Notes Mystery Sew Along. We're in week 3, section 3, so let's dive right into it. Hopefully you're keeping up, and if you're not, don't worry. These videos are going to be out there for a while. Jump into the fun when you can and give yourself a break. I know what it's like to try to keep up with projects, and I have my intentions, but sometimes the reality falls a little bit different than that. So no worries if you're not right on schedule with us. So let's open up our week 3 instructions, section 3 instructions, I should say. And right away, they talk about some dimensional papers, which are made with the felt inside your embellishing kit. So be sure to grab out the felt. And you have 6 designs to choose from, and you'll choose 3 of those. So in the very back here, toward the back, I should say, on page 25, you have your designs there. Now I want to show you where we're going with this. I can't resist to show you. This is where we're going. We have our dimensional little paper coming off of our typewriter with felt key, just the space bar and the keys, and it's adorable. So I wanted to show you that straight away. This is what we'll be building together, and let me show you how to get there. So pick your 3 favorite expressions, and right away Kim mentions that we'll be using the white felt as our paper and embroidery stabilizer, printable sticky wash away. Now, when I opened up this, I was like, oh, I don't have embroidery stabilizer with me. So if you are inclined to get the product Kim recommends in her pattern, she talks about sulky stick and stitch stabilizer. So if that's something that you're inclined to get, go grab that and use that, and you'll trace your designs on that product. Now, so that I'd have something to show you today, I just grabbed some fusible interfacing, and that will work. This is not a project I plan to ever wash, so these were just done with some fusible stabilizer. But again, if you're inclined to use exactly what Kim mentions on page 22, it's the sulky stick and stitch stabilizer, which we do not carry at this point, but maybe we will in the future, because apparently it's a pretty great product, because I know Kim only recommends things that she truly uses. You'll trace or print 3 designs onto your stabilizer, or in our case, I did some fusible interfacing. And she has you also draw on the frame of that. Now be sure to use a permanent pen, not a friction pen, because you will be ironing that down to your felt. So again, we are always going to be kind of switching back and forth between our friction pen and our micron, and now we'll be using the micron because we want it to stay. Now I wanted to point out something inside her dimensional papers for Besties Forever. I noticed the type was offset to the right, and that's of course just that cute factor. I like my things a little bit more centered than that. So I went ahead and adjusted it. I drew my shape and then shifted it over and built my frame around that. So don't worry, if you too really like your things kind of more centered up versus right justified, then go ahead and draw those frame around where you're comfortable. So make sure you give yourself the liberty to do whatever it is that feels right for you. Once you have that drawn on, I went ahead and just grabbed a piece of my felt and iron that down. And that's when you'll go ahead and use a back stitch. I think she even used 4 strands for that. She did. Back stitch the sentiment with 4 strands of the black floss and use a French knot for the dots and periods. And then if you're going to be doing the heart design, which we did on one of those with the Miss You, we used the back stitch in 2 strands here of the dark pink. So if you choose that sentiment, you'll be doing just the 2 strands of the dark pink. Once you have that stitched out, you'll go ahead and bring those to just your cutting mat, and we'll cut out directly on those drawn lines. Let's go ahead and do that real quick, and we'll get that out of the way. And you know, I better make sure, because I did draw those with a permanent marker, that I wanted to cut just a breadth actually on the inside of those lines. Because we did a micron pen, they're not going to disappear. So just know that you'll want to cut just on the inside so that you no longer see that line where you had drawn. So we have our Besties Forever already ready to go. And her next step, I thought this was very clever. As we move on, the next thing she talks about is the typewriter. She has the backgrounds and all of the shapes. So we can go ahead and build the typewriter right now together, or we can talk about what are we going to do with this thing we just did. Let's go ahead and jump right into that. We're going to jump ahead just a little bit onto page 23, where she talks about how to align that onto our background. Now you'll go ahead and grab out your Keep in Touch 1, 2, and 3 baggies. So I'll go ahead and grab those out. And of course, they're all white backgrounds, so you could really put them anywhere you prefer. I'll go ahead and grab just that cute white polka dot. And Kim's instructions are very clear of how she wants us to mark this. And actually, we'll jump back onto page 22 at the very bottom. Trace design onto fusible web. You don't need to do all of that stuff. We took care of that. Adhere web to the wrong side of your fabric. Cut out shapes directly on the trace line. You have an applique kit, pre-fused laser cut. You don't have to worry about that. So you can skip those steps. This is a step that you don't want to skip, however. With a disappearing pen, mark the vertical line of the background fabric. So if we bring our fabric out, let's go ahead and give it a good press, because if it's been folded inside that bag, actually, you know what? I like that line because that's going to tell me where my center is. I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's go ahead and mark that top and bottom, because that's what she just told me to do, right? And we can just iron in the middle. I'm just thinking on the fly, why would I press that seam out when that's my center and that's where she wants me to go? She says, with a disappearing pen, mark the vertical center of the background fabric. And she literally just drew a line straight down, which we can absolutely do that as well. Top to bottom. Okay, so we've drawn our vertical line. Her next step is mark a horizontal line 2.5 inches down from the top. Basically, we're trying to create a little bullseye to line up our paper to stitch it to the background. So with our Creative Grid ruler, I'm going to make sure that I am measured down 2.5 inches. Let's see, I'll turn that around and I'm going to put the 2.5 along here. There we go. Don't worry that the ruler doesn't extend all the way there, because I'm just trying to mark that spot. That's the location where we will center our quote paper. And you know, we can measure that if we want to get really specific. And about right like that. We're going to pin that because I don't want it to move, although it's sitting right on that kind of horizon line. And her next step, oh, she does say pin in place. Use a 1/4 inch seam allowance and sew the dimensional paper to the background fabric. So let's go do that right now. This will be hidden. I'll still use white thread, but this will eventually be hidden by the applique that will be going over that. But we'll still use a nice coordinating thread. Okay, so now we have that where we want it to be. How cute is that? I mean, I've never seen a quilt that had this kind of dimension to it. And we're only in the 3rd week. And I've seen what's in that embellishing kit with the pull flowers and all of the fun stuff coming up. Let's put that aside for now, because I can see now we need to build our typewriter that's basically going to go kind of on top of that, as if the paper was feeding out of it. So let's go ahead now, and we're going to bring out our shapes for, we'll build one typewriter together. So let's grab all of those shapes. There's a lot of little shapes associated with that. You'll definitely be wanting to go ahead and build that with your applique pressing sheet and your light box and of course your diagram. So I've got some other things in here that'll come a little bit later in the pattern. Let me put those aside for now. get myself organized. All right, so with our applique pressing sheet, we know we're going to be building. Let's bring that a little bit closer so you can see everything that we're doing. We have a lot of components to the typewriter, so let's just turn the page and just get a good look at that. In fact, we can bring out one of these so you're looking at the shapes right here. So hopefully my head's out of the way, you can see what we're about to do. You can see that this is coming out the very top of that. So this is going to end up kind of appliquing down on top of that. But we're going to build the typewriter first and then move it onto the background as one unit. The thing that will be the easiest for you is just to follow my instructions. We deviate just a little bit from what Kim did because we added an extra shape to your laser cut kit. So let me just describe what that is. This bar back here, this black bar that is behind the white satin stitch, in the pattern, they have you do that with thread. We went ahead, if you refer all the way back to your laser cut kind of section, your applique key, that came in the very bottom right of the first page, we said in sections 3 and 4, the paper holder and the mailbox base, which is in section 4, we're not there yet, that'll be later on, are created with a satin stitch. For your convenience, cut these shapes. We have cut these shapes from solid black fabric, so you have the option to applique them instead if you prefer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take you down that road because that is what is in your kit, and I think it's a little bit simpler. We will be doing a little bit of satin stitch with our machine, which is fun, but we'll only be doing the white. So for that reason, she talks about a black thread. If you want to do the satin stitch, then this shape that is in your laser cut, you can just disregard that. But we're going to go ahead and use that. And let's build our shape. We'll go ahead and use this as our frame. We'll get our light box on. We've got an iron warming up. And we're just going to start. And you can see that really some of the shapes that need to go down first are these rollers back here and the base that's in the bottom. So we can start with these shapes. We'll of course have to put this on top. My, again, light box is always dialed down just a touch for the overhead camera. But at home, if you're using a light box, bring it all the way up. And we're just going to build this before we even bring that onto the background. So I'll just do that quietly so we can kind of just zoom through this section. Now the one thing that I wanted to mention to you, I'm actually going to put that board down because I can see where that key goes. This shape right here, let me move this out of the way. Turn that off for just a second. Let me just push that down so nothing's going to move. I can move that off to the side. Isn't that a great feature of that mat? It's just kind of this tackiness. This right here is called the type bar. Now when I went to draw the shape on, of course my black micron pen's not going to work. No chance of that. My black friction pen's not going to work. I need to use a white marking tool. So I have my Soline pen, and the reason I like this one is it doesn't erase with heat because I need to draw those lines down before I iron this all together, because I can, as it is, even with my light box at its brightest setting, barely see that. So I went ahead, I had to have my light box at full intensity, and I put that shape, well, I've got one that I haven't even done yet. Remove the backing, remove that paper, which helps. It's one less layer to look through. Lay that on top of there. I turn my light box to full intensity and I could just barely see it. And then you can just draw those lines in. And you know, it's okay to get this, you know, you're kind of going for this natural arc. So if you want to just kind of wing it, you can, but you're not going to be able to see it without a light box on its fullest intensity. And you get the idea. You're just going to draw those lines in. And the great thing about the Soline glue pen, it doesn't Doesn't come off with the iron, but it will with a damp cloth. So if you miss it, don't worry. Go ahead and just get it wet and you'll be able to attempt it again. So I went ahead and did mine ahead of time, so I wanted to mention that. The other thing that I went ahead and did in advance was this, she calls it the paper roller. Because I know I'm going to be doing a satin stitch that's of that thickness, let me grab my ruler. I found it really helpful to go ahead and mark that line ahead of time with my Clover Choco marker. It's actually, I shouldn't call it a marker, it's chalk. That way I have something to shoot for versus my satin stitch kind of wandering down there. So it's just an idea to maybe pre-mark where that satin stitch kind of boundary will be. So I'm going to go ahead and mark it on this side. And I think I marked it a little bit too bright. You know what? You can just, with a damp cloth, get rid of that. I'll grab another one real quick just to save us time. I've got another one in here we can use. But that's the nice thing about using chalk. It's nothing permanent. And the Choco markers, if you like using the chalk, I shouldn't keep calling it a marker, it's chalk. Come in, I think we have white, pink, and blue. So even if you need to mark a line on a white, for example, pick up either the pink or the blue. So let's go ahead and mark. I'll try to keep my head out of the way. And I'll flip that around. I just don't do enough satin stitching with my machine to have the confidence that I'm going to keep kind of tracking straight. So this is just an option for you if you too want to go ahead and have some level of a path. And it looks like that did go all the way down end to end. So I think I will trace that all the way to the end. And we'll do this on camera together. Okay, cool. That's down there. All right. So I want to have those done ahead of time before I start putting everything down, and then it's just a little bit more difficult to do these markings. All right, let's resume where we were. Let's get this going again, and we're going to iron this whole thing together. Bring it to the background. Looks like I'm lined up. Okay, we'll put this down. See here, it looks like that piece kind of sits, this part sits behind that bar. So let's put that down next. And we'll get our bar. And let's peel the paper off the back. You don't want to touch it very much because I can see my fingers are starting to rub off some of that chalk. That looks centered to me. And I'm kind of lining up on that chevron shape, the fabric. And I'm just making sure I have even spacing between these two slots. So to have a good look at that, let's see if we've missed anything. I think everything is there. So we'll go ahead and take that very carefully, to our iron. And let's iron that down. As you can see, these keys were done by hand, and she talks about that inside the pattern. We can go look at that while I'm ironing this down, and that's cooling. And I believe she's stitching with quite some density. She definitely talks about that. 6 strands of the white floss will be for the shafts of she calls them the type bar, and then the type bar heads. This part, she uses 3 strands of the white floss. So that's done by hand if you're going to be doing the sewing version. This, however, go ahead and set your machine up for a satin stitch, and you're going to be wanting to use a white or an off-white thread for that. So if you've got your thread set, you're going to go ahead and grab this color here for that and get that loaded into your machine. I have a bigger spool on that. Now once that cools down, I'm going to go ahead, and as you can see, the whole point is to lay that on top of here, and this is all blanket stitched around that. Now you saw me do blanket stitch in the first video as well as a straight stitch, so These videos are long enough as they are, so that if you're don't recall that, just go back to that first video, practice that satin stitch. I always encourage you to practice a satin stitch on some scrap fabric first before you go to your actual project. Okay, I think we're probably cooled down enough that we can very carefully peel this off and transfer this to our background. And we'll go get that satin stitch done. I want you to see that because we didn't have a chance to do anything like that before. Look how cute this is. Oh my goodness. And as far as aligning again, we'll move this out of the way for the moment. You know, as far as alignment goes, I'm always just looking for, you know, we've got that center line. You could absolutely get out a ruler if you want to do that and make sure it's exactly centered. From here to here is the same distance as to here to here. I feel that's centered. I'm going to go ahead and iron that down. Now just be careful. Anytime that you are ironing felt, you would want to have a pressing cloth. So if you think that you're going to touch the felt at all, go ahead and grab that pressing cloth out. Then you don't have to be quite so careful with that. All right, we'll get that all ironed down. I'll get my machine set up for the satin stitch. I too am going to practice this off camera, and then when I come back and feel I've got the right width, we will go ahead and stitch that down together. We're going to also square this up with our pop rulers, and then we'll keep moving through our section 3 of our Love Notes Mystery Quilt. Okay, so I've practiced off camera, and we're going to pretend that this is already done by hand. Of course, you could do it afterward, doesn't matter. But let's get started with our satin stitch. Here we go. So that's what that looks like. How pretty is that? Just really, really pretty. And then we can go do that hand embroidery now if we should choose to do that. Okay, let's move on to the next part of our project. Now there's one shape that we didn't add yet, and that's this extra little shape called the type guide shape. And by the way, I wanted to mention something to you. She used words like carriage fabric, paper unroller, paper rollers, type guide shape, type bar. She does have that explained in the pattern. So if you're a little confused about that, you can definitely look at this up here and down here. And she explains what, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm not sure what the type guide shape is. It's this little shape right here that is, you had to do the satin stitch first, and now you go ahead and center that, and we'll iron that down as well. And of course you would now do all of your blanket stitch or straight stitch or zigzag or whatever you're going to do to applique down all your typewriter shapes, and you'll complete all of your typewriters in the same way. There's no difference from one to the next, just different expressions. Once that's completely done, then she wants us to go ahead, and this is an important step on page 23. You'll fold the dimensional paper, and we'll go ahead and trim this one down because this one's actually complete. She wants you to fold that dimensional paper down, covering the typewriter, to tape in place. You know, I don't have any tape with me on set, so I'll just go ahead and quickly pin that in place. She just wants you to get it out of the way. We'll square that up with an 8.5 by 6.5 pop ruler with centering that typewriter. So we'll go ahead and grab that 6.5 by 8.5, which I believe is this one right here, the second one. And we can move these others out of the way for now. I'm just finding I really enjoy working with the pop rulers. Until this project, I really had not, because I've always thought, you know, they are really exclusively for Kimberbell projects, and I hadn't really had an opportunity to do a lot of those projects. But you know what I figured out? These rulers are fantastic for squaring up. Anytime you're wanting to square up these types of shapes to those sizes for any project. So they are obviously fantastic for Kimberbell projects, but many others as well. So, so much use for the prop rulers. All right, step one is just going ahead to center that. Now I can see the value of truly measuring so that they're all the same. Now she did have us cut our backgrounds to the size of this. So really, if you go ahead and center your typewriter on that background and you center them all the same, then they should square up all the same. But if you want to be very specific, you can go ahead and say, all right, well, that is 1 1/4 inches, and you're making sure that they're all the same because you want those to be, they show them side by side. I don't know if they actually get sewn into the quilt side by side, but we have to assume that they might. And so you definitely want them to be the same. So just a reminder of how to use our pop ruler. You never want to really use it without a spinning ruler or a spinning mat because you don't want to shift anything. So let's go ahead. We're going to square this up. I'm not going to touch my fabric or my frame. If you want a little bit more of something to hang on to, go ahead and add the extra frame in, and that is just to keep your hands just a little bit further away from the blade, provide a little bit more stability. Now we'll talk about those cute little felt hearts that you're seeing there. I think I jumped ahead. In fact, I know I did. I can see I get all excited. So we can talk about, I'm a little out of sequence, but we'll talk about those felt shapes that are the keys and then here. So there's art. How adorable. I just got excited. I had to do it. I had to show it to you. So that's what that's going to look like. And you can just imagine that little three-dimensional thing in the project. Everyone seeing your finished quilt is going to absolutely comment on that. So what is the deal with those keys and the space bar? Well, that's again getting to use part of your embellishing kit. And on page 26, you'll just grab a piece of fusible webbing, and I just traced out my hearts and my space bar. You'll go ahead and iron that down to your felt if you want to go ahead and use a pressing cloth, because as she mentions in there, anytime you're really using felt, leather, glitter, any of those specialty type products, go ahead and use a pressing cloth. So just iron that down and cut those out, remove the paper as you always would. I've done that ahead of time. Let me grab these little guys out. And of course you'll do that for each of your typewriters. So there's a lot of little hearts running around, but they're absolutely adorable. Now I was very specific when I laid out these because you want those to be in a row. If there was ever a time that I'd recommend you go ahead and use a ruler for a layout, this would be that time. So we can grab this one, for example. And if you measure what's in her pattern, you will see that that measurement, let's see here, is sitting right at that 1/2 inch mark. So as you lay this down here with your 1/2 inch, just like that, then you can just lay those along here so that the top of those hearts are just touching your ruler, and that's going to help you get that alignment. So it looks like there's 6 keys in the top row, so you kind of want to offset those 2 center ones from the center equally and then build out from there. So cute. I think we were going to count how many times I said cute. I think we better mark a tally mark because I said it again here. And I have a feeling the further we go along this project, the more we're going to say that word because this is just adorable. And then you'll just line up the bottom row. just to kind of match that, kind of in the gaps, so to speak. I might be missing one. I think I am. We can cut out one more. That and that. One more would come right here. We'll put our space bar here. Make sure you love that alignment. I'm missing a heart right now, which I've got one here. We could do that. We'll iron them down. What I did as far as the stitching, and I just want to show you that real quick, it's just a straight stitch. Kim talks about that in the pattern to go ahead, as I jumped ahead there, and she talks about with the hearts to go ahead and just straight stitch those. I believe she mentions that. I know she mentioned it because that's what I was able right here. Stitch a straight line down the center of each heart key and the length of the space bar. So you could either just go straight down the space bar or maybe do around the frame like I did, but go right down through the center of that. And still, you know, even though I did iron these down, I just gave it a light iron so that if I want to have the sides kind of lift up for dimension, they can. So that's how you finish your typewriters. Of course, I got a little out of sequence. I squared that up, but it doesn't really matter. You could square that up first and then sew down the felt if you'd like. All right, let's move on. You've done your typewriters, do all three the same, and we're going to move on to the Sending Love block. So you'll grab that fabric out, as well as your applique shape to get to use some more embellishments, this time glitter. I love the glitter. Oh my gosh, I love the glitter. So fun. So I've got those shapes cut out ahead of time. So let's just bring all of that out. I'll just show you what I've got here. Now we went ahead, she mentioned something inside her pattern about lining. She said fusible woven interfacing is recommended on the back of the outer envelope to reduce the shadowing, basically so that the gray doesn't show through and then the red glitter doesn't show through all the way to the front. We've taken care of that for you with your laser shape. We added another layer onto the envelope so that that'll reduce any of the red or the teal coming through. So we'll grab our fabric out, and we did that ahead of time. So I just wanted to show you where we're going again. What are we going to be doing? And this is very straightforward. You can absolutely use the light box again as you prefer. So let's go ahead and grab our envelope. It's always nice to just have that visibility. So we will use that since we have that available to us. And I can move that spinning mat out of the way. Let's move that. Boy, I'm a messy quilter, guys. I confess. If you have ever gone to a quilt retreat with me, ask Lynn, ask other people that they're like, yep, it's true. Jen is a really messy, quilter, and you're seeing that a little bit here now. So we're going to put our gray fabric. Let's get out our mat again. We've got 3 hearts that are touching our envelope and 1 that's up above. So it's really the 3 that we'll go ahead and use now. 1, 3, and 4. 2 will kind of be up in the sky there for now. And we'll start with laying down that gray fabric. And we've built that tuck under in there for you so that that'll just fit nicely under that envelope. Now, just a reminder, when you're using the glitter, I went ahead and cut the shapes out of a freezer paper, and I didn't use any kind of heat and bond. And the shapes for the hearts are not reversed for fusible applique. What that means for you, I went ahead and actually traced those out. Let me show you that real quick before I jump into that. I got all excited. 1, 2, 3, and 4. See how those are going to be tucked into. This is that heart right here. This is the heart here. Kim doesn't have that tuck under on these diagrams. So that's why I extended the shape. So as you lay this down, turn this on, do you see how that's actually where the shape ends? Let me draw that line real quick. That's actually where the shape ends, is right there. I extended that because I want that to tuck under my kind of this part of that. So you just know that anytime you're tracing around a shape with your embellishing kit, which you're cutting out yourself, we didn't do that for you because we didn't have access to that, you'll need to add that tuck under yourself. If it's a laser shape that Shabby Fabrics has cut, we've already taken that tuck under into account for you, and you don't need to worry about that. So that's why I have these dashed lines. That's telling me I've got tuck under, but notice these two don't have any tuck under. That's why there's no dashed lines on those. So I went ahead, as I said, and cut those out of a freezer paper, where this is the kind of the matte side and this is the shiny side. Now, knowing that I want my shape, my glitter, to be, of course, here, I put that shape with the number side down and just traced around that. It's very easy to actually get this backwards. So that's why I wanted to point that out, is go ahead and trace around that shape. We are not going to iron the freezer paper down. We're simply using the rigidity of the freezer paper just to trace around. And as you can see with that shape, if you envision, it's going to be in the perfect orientation. So I just wanted to remind you of that. If you're not careful and you just put this with the number 3 up, your shapes will be reflected going the wrong direction. So in that case, once you draw your number, flip that upside down, trace around it, and then everything will be going in the proper orientation. So I've cut those out and they're ready to go. So let's start adding those in. So we'll take that out of the way. This is where we're headed. We roll that back down. So let's put this shape in next. And then we'll put, you know what? I drew all of my shapes out of red. I just noticed I was supposed to put this out of pink and that out of red, but this is for demonstration purposes only. So we'll just go with that. And hey, by the way, if you want to do all red, do all red. Kim was very generous in her embellishing kit that you have the liberty to do that. So if you love all red hearts, maybe I do and didn't even realize it, go ahead and go with all red hearts. And I believe that's my number 1. There's a lot of value in actually not taking off, kind of keeping them together till you're ready to use those. Now I've lost a little bit of track of which one's 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is obviously my big one, and I can probably see that those go there and there. And you know what? They're hearts, right? They could probably think this one actually belongs here, and the smaller one goes up there, just like that. Now, once those are down, I'm going to go ahead and put my envelope on. Let me adjust this one. I think I moved it. Let's make sure we've got our iron heating up. You definitely want to have your pressing cloth handy because we're going to be touching glitter. We know we don't want to do that without the protection of that. Now, I'm not going to put this down there, right? The whole idea of using the applique pressing sheet is to kind of merge this together as one unit. That heart being out there in Nowhereville, there's no reason to go ahead and iron that down to the applique pressing sheet, only to just remove it. So we'll iron this down. How adorable that those little hearts are kind of peeking out of that envelope. So if you are enjoying just having all of your shapes cut out, you know, we have so many laser cut kits here at Shabby Fabrics. It's one of our customers' favorite products. So if you're really enjoying having things already cut out for you, be sure to explore all the other kits that we have on our website. You can just go right to look at the kits, and there's a specific category that says laser cut kits, and you'll be able to enjoy that same convenience of just having all of those applique shapes with the prefused laser cut with heat and bond light on the back, and it just can skip that whole tracing and cutting out and just jump right into the fun. So just like before, we would just let that cool. Go ahead and move that onto the background fabric, just like we did right here. And we went ahead and stitched around that. And let's jump right back into the pattern. I know she's going to have us square that up because that's what we do at Kimberbell, right? As we go ahead, we oversize our background, sew everything down, and then square it up. Sure enough, she's going to have us grab our 6.5 inch by 6.5 inch square pop ruler set, and we'll go ahead and trim that, which I will definitely do off camera. as soon as we're done with this particular video. And I noticed these amazing dimensional hearts, but she does say that the dimensional felt hearts will be added after the quilting is complete. So we don't get to do that now, but we know that is coming. So that is our section 3 of our love notes. I'm going to get busy getting ready for section 4. I know you have a lot to work on as well. Join the conversation. Let us know how you're doing. We hope you're having a great time with the sew along, and I'll see you next week.